But what we're going to start with this morning is 2017, I believe, is the last time I was here. We got I kind of went back getting ready for this one. I went back and watched that video and I was like, wow, that was bad. We had a lot of fun on that one, but trying to piece things together, the one thing I got out of it when I rewatched it, if you didn't pay attention, I did kind of lay it on the line where we're going. Well, this slide right here is kind of what we predicted we were going to do at that point. A lot of what we're going to talk about today is perennial cover crops and that, hopefully. This field is going to be a topic, or the subject, a lot of that talk, but what I really want you to show here, this is 2017 interseed cover crop that survived all the way through 2019, and it looks like we got her coming in 2020 already. Towards the end of the slide series, this is that same field. We're going to talk about this slide towards the end. The reason I brought it up front, so if your neighbor falls asleep during this, give him a nudge when you see this slide again so he's awake. So I'm stuck in the room here. But context where I'm at, right up here in the far northeast corner of Iowa. Biggest thing I want to point out is this 140 days of growing season. You know, yesterday when I got down here, one of the first guys I talked to used to live up in this area, then he went to northwest Iowa, and the first thing we're talking about is how deep you bury your water lines, because when he got down here in Des Moines area, 42 inches is what code is. Where I'm at, we bury water lines about 8 foot deep. So just, that's going to be a little pertinent what we're talking about here today. The other thing is, we're 43 degrees north latitude. Key part I want to point on this slide is the amount of precipitation we get. As we talk about this, you're going to hear some numbers later on. We need to start paying attention to that. But I heard last night already too, we need to focus on getting every inch into the soil we can so we can utilize it in a growing crop. And the other key thing is, I like to always point out, most of you guys here in Iowa to realize the glacial till line. The big thing on our farm is we have up to 25 different soil types, so everything that I figure out on our farm has to work from anything from pure gravel to pure peat, or as I always tell people, we're right where the glacier took a dump. We have, you name it, we have it. But getting back to 2017 where I left off last time, shortly after we were here, we won the Iowa Environmental Leadership Award. One of those proud moments. Got to honor my parents even with us on that one. My dad's probably my biggest mentor, so I always like to tip a hat to him. But that week we were down at the state fairgrounds. This is what I came home to. If you remember 2017, we had 21 inches of rain in a week, 7 inch 3 times, I think is what it was. This is on my home farm, right south of the place. You know, here we're down getting an award for doing good. Come home to this, it was pretty humbling. The good news I always like to point out, the fence line's right here, the water flows that way. Go down a couple hundred feet in the waterway, this is the runoff off of our watershed. So I think we're doing pretty good. But through that whole time frame, we're doing tile line monitoring, stuff like that, trying to pay attention to take accord to what we're actually doing on our farm. This is that spring in my front yard. Do we have erosion issues? There again, fence line to this side, wind's blowing that way. I always like to point out, notice how that as it goes across our field, it gets clear. Good friend of mine, Steve Groff in Pennsylvania, has kind of been doing a bunch of the same type of stuff. Just document what's actually happening so we know the problem we're trying to address. You know, he's went out and sampled the snert, as he calls it, the dirt in the snowdrifts, and then he goes in the field and pulls an actual sample and shows that we're actually eroding the best soil off of our land. Fast forward to spring, he went out again, the runoff on the streets. This time he called it smud. So here's the smud collected from the road versus the field. There again, you can tell some of the best soil's washing off. Now most people are going to come to talk to you at an event like this about cover crops. I've thrown out the word cover crop on our farm. I really don't enjoy it anymore. You know, I was kind of glad to go after Nicole this morning when she's kind of alluding, you know, we need to start planting crops for an intended purpose. They're not cover crops anymore. We got to start figuring out how we can utilize them in our system to promote the actual cash crop. Or if you go to where we're going, our actual cover crops become cash crops. The most interesting thing I like to point out here is the one key thing missing on this slide is productivity. You know, when we talk cover crops, why do we not talk about productivity? You know, everybody wants numbers, but everybody's afraid to talk about them. This is where we're going. Companion cropping, intercropping, stuff like that. It's getting the mindset that we're going to use that plants we're planting for an intended purpose. Not the touchy-feely, hey, we're doing good, let's figure out how to make them pay, utilize them to the best extent we can. But this is nothing new. I mean, the native Indians could do it. Why is it taking us so long to figure out how to do it again? And the Indians did the Three Sisters projects. We're going to talk about that a little bit more here, because when I first started seeing that, we started playing with it in our greenhouse. We had the greenhouse sitting there, so we just started planting beans, peas, squash, corn. Next thing you know, we had beans and peas that were supposed to get 12 feet tall, suddenly hitting 18 feet tall. The plants just thrived. You know, start understanding them plant interactions. Started researching more. Pretty soon we started realizing a lot of your gardeners had this stuff figured out. You know, a lot of your commercial-sized farmers laugh at small farmers. I'm paying attention harder ever, because that's who we got to pay attention to, because they got to think a little harder to make things work better. Just a little closer up view of that slide. You know, if we're growing corn, this is our friendly crops we should be working with. This is our antagonistic crops. All that, what Nicole was talking about here, if you sat in that last class, is kind of what we've been paying attention to here for quite a few years now. Conventional wisdom and say your integrated weed management. You don't see any of this stuff in that yet. You know, we're getting close with biological controls in there, but what about the rotational aspect of stuff and thinking ahead, what we're going to plant here, what we're going to use as a crop there. This is a slide I just captured this winter. You know, some people are starting to think about that. You know, we want to be in that little circle. Start thinking big picture. How can we fit all these pieces and puzzles? You know, I hate to admit, yesterday I came in here and sat in a little class there, and I walked out because the guy, all I heard is, you can't do this, you can't do that. We got to start thinking about what we can do. How can we move forward? This is not unattainable, but I'm not going to spend much time about it because we just had the expert here. You know, we've been starting to really focus on this stuff. I wish I'd get this slide a little clearer, but you know, this just basically what Nicole was all talking about in here just a half hour ago. This stuff can be done in Iowa. You know, these are all the different crops. What the crop is telling you. Yeah, a lot of these are vegetables and stuff like that. It's not too far of a stretch to figure out how to take it from the vegetable world to the cash grain industry and stuff like that. Google's a wonderful tool. You know, this is one of the most powerful ones I've found to date. I was taking notes pretty hard over there when Nicole was up there, so I can't wait to see where we can start going with some of this. Another thing we picked up through the greenhouse days. For every ton of dry fertilizer we hauled into that greenhouse, we hauled out 4 tons, 3 to 4 ton of dry matter produce. Plus, we also hauled 3 to 4 ton into the refuse pile and the scraps. Where was that all coming from? You know, John Kemp, a couple of us were just talking about him down there. He told an example just a couple of weeks ago. There was an experiment a couple of years ago where the guy took a 200 kilogram tub of soil, planted a tree in it. They harvested the tree how many years later, and it only lost less than a kilogram of soil out of that. Now, how did it grow that whole tree out of there? Yet our universities keep talking about removal rates. I'm not the smartest guy out here, but You know, we're seeing some pretty interesting things if you start paying attention to some of that stuff. Another big piece of our puzzle is every time we do something in the field, we always leave a check strip. How many guys are leaving check strips? I think they happen pretty naturally in my world because we make a lot of mistakes. But it's as simple as this. I usually leave point rows. Now, I was in Delaware earlier this week, and the guy was telling don't plant cereal rye and corn together. I hate to tell you, but there's corn in there. But watch this little check strip here. That summer, we had kind of what they call a flash drought. Notice how that triangle was the first to burn up. Cover crops use moisture. Doesn't that kind of make you think a little different? Notice that fall. There again, all that residue is breaking down faster where the check strip was. Ain't quite figured that one out myself yet, but I'm paying attention to them little details, trying to figure out how we can work them into our total system. Another one I always like to leave in here is how many tillage guys we have yet? Don't be shy, raise your hand. Why do you till the soil? To warm it up, right? On the right here, your right, is my neighbor's field, no-till rip bean stubble. On the left is my field. That's our meager twin row cover crop in March. You can notice a little snow in the snow fence line there. Pay attention to the temperature cursor here.
Soybean stubble with covers. Soybean stubble without covers and ripped. Who would have thunk?
I can usually win a beer over that one. Just to back that up, we've buried a lot of temperature sensors over the last couple of years. The baseline showing the cover crop, the wavy line showing how much warmer or cooler. What it's actually showing is up until corn canopied, the cover crop is warmer. Then once the corn canopied, we went cooler in the corn canopy. In the fall, when the cover crop started coming back around with the interseed cover crops, we actually go warmer again. I know the degrees mentioned last night was like 80, I think Nicole said it again this morning, 86 to 90 degrees is where your bacterial starts shutting down. That year, the hottest I think we got was like 81 degrees. I think we got up to 105, 106 a time or two the years we did that. But just to show you how, we always like to have a little fun with this one. Just to show you how accurate that little app is. That's the in-floor heat in our house. I've done this enough times it's not a surprise now, but that's the coffee maker in our house. And that's just a little plug-in for your iPhone, FLIR camera, FLIR 1 I think is what they call it. About $199 nowadays. Another big piece to our puzzle I like to focus on is our controlled traffic. Compaction is our biggest issue, so why do we want to put any more compaction out there than we absolutely have to? So all our equipment is set up 12 rows, 30 foot or 120 inch tram lines. And the only way I can describe it so people understand it, Yield Maps sold a lot of pattern tile. I think drones and that will help sell controlled traffic. If you get a time, either, we used to get up in a helicopter and fly our fields just to get a good visual. Nowadays with drone, you can do it pretty quick and easy. You can start seeing the difference in the variances in your fields. That's what a tram line looks like for us through the season. It's about 2 inches thick. It looks like an asphalt. Below that, you can't tell the difference. It's all homogeneous soil all the whole way across the field other than that little tram line. Part of it is we use all tractors up till that point in the season. But what I always like to point out, here we got the repair crew in there already. We've got worms and you can see fine roots going through there. One of the biggest things I like to show is quite a few years ago, I was kind of had in my mindset, I was watching the southern farmers in the Delta. They corrugate their fields. Number one, for drainage. Number two, it effectively doubles their topsoil. After a few years of controlled traffic, we're having the plants do that for us now. I don't need to hill it up anymore. By planting that plant in the same general zone, what we're showing there is we got about an 8-inch rise where the plants are versus the rest of the field. So when we get these exceptionally wet springs in that, it helps keep our, we're all pattern tiled where I'm at, but we can keep that little bit drier. The other thing I like to show, and the reason I leave this in here, is I don't really care to dig root pits on my farm anymore. If you want to see what a drastic disturbance is on a farm, dig a root pit. This is, root pit was 2015. That was last spring. I think something like that. But the next one's next spring, or 2019. But we're showing 8 inches of depression there yet. All the soil went back in. The only way I can describe it is soil collapse. We've built that much air and infiltration into our soils. When you disturb it that once, she just collapses. Just to hammer it home, this slide shows this spring yet it was still pretty evident. The only water I had standing on my whole farm was that root pit, and you can still see the outline of where we dug. Oh, this is okay, and now I know where I'm at. This just shows how complicated our system's starting to get. It's simple, but it's complicated. The biggest thing I like is we're no longer planting in root balls and stuff like that. A lot of things is done just for the simple fact that we're trying to move that root ball so we get a smooth riding planter. This is malt barley, no-tilled into corn, and here you can see the soybeans emerging already too. This is the unabridged view of it, but I want you'll see here all the residue. There's our tram lines showing up. There's our corn stalks from the year before. There's our soybean rows. There's our cereals. We're staying on the same tram line, it's just we're shifting the planters and stuff like that to get the planters running where they're running unrestricted. And the biggest thing I like to focus on is now, by doing that, we're affecting our plant density, but we're also affecting our nutrient placement. We're getting that shifted across the full spectrum. It's just each plant's got its own place. They're not competing with each other. A lot of people like to talk allelopathy effect. I guess in my mind is if we got distance between the old and the new, they're not going to compete with each other. Okay, on our farm, as we started seeing the problem, how are we going to address that? Up until 2002, we were continuous corn, started bringing soybeans and stuff like that in. But first, I mastered interseeding corn. We started that in 06. We got it figured out for their corn-on-corn rotation. And then we started bringing the other cereal. Now we're doing corn, soybeans, wheat, rye, barley, buckwheat, oats this year, and we're dabbling with sunflowers now. But to make some of them work, we've got to start stacking them. We'll plant a cereal, plant a soybean, then maybe you'll see how crazy we're going to get here yet. And then most of you have probably heard about the 60-inch corn stuff and that. We started that when we started noticing the difference we could make in the cover crop. If we ever get to where we're grazing cover crops, that's a big part of what we're doing on that one. But all that led to what I call living soil armor. You'll hear Gabe and them talk about soil armor. Well, the biggest thing as we started looking into that, I figured out I got to have mine alive. We can't have dead residue in northeast Iowa laying on top of the soil, or we got a residue mat, and it just holds the moisture too much. We can't get it to dry out underneath of it. So that's what the soil armor does for us. But the other thing we've realized the last 2-3 years is Iowa was once a swamp. Some days I think she's trying to revert to it. We're going to go back to 1830 on this one, 1830 to 59. What I really like to point out on this one is all the blue. Think we've made a difference? You know, we talk about Des Moines watershed, look how much blue was in that area. You know, I'm up in this area, look how much forestation we had. Fast forward to 2002 satellite. Some of this is making me question when we talk about getting back to nature's image, how are we going to do that? You know, one of my first eye-opening moments was when the first time I seen my soil on the rainfall simulator. The key part that kept ringing in my mind was that time, and every time my soil's been on there, our systems hold at least a third of the moisture. You know, everybody says when you're on the rainfall simulator, we want to see that black chocolate cake. Well, these two slides are mine. I think that one's from Betty Crocker. But other little thing I wanted to make sure to hit on today is everybody wants to talk about regenerative farmers. How many regenerative farmers do we have in here? I Googled it just to see what I came up with. Any regenerative farmers here? How do you tell you're a regenerative farmer?
Get better every year.
I think you raised your hand, didn't you?
Improvement in the soil.
Bingo. You might be a regenerative farmer if your soils show the difference in progress. I look a little foolish anymore because I carry around bags of my soil anymore. If you guys want to come up here, we're going to talk about these a little bit. The next couple steps, they'll be laying here after a bit if you want to look at them. But this is the two samples. What would you say is the difference between these two samples of soil? 50 feet. That's the major difference. If you're at our field day back in September, you've seen when we did this one live finally. Coming home, I was always trying to go back to that rainfall simulator. When I showed how we can hold a third of the moisture, I kept trying to put numbers to that. And even the Corps of Engineers is kind of reaching out now. We're trying to put these numbers to something they can use. So what I did when I got home from Texas this summer is I went and took a shovel full of each different management zone around our farm, tried to keep track of the same soil type. All but one of these is the same soil type. But this is a corn on corn with a 32-way interseed mix. I'll tell the rest of the test here, next slide I guess it is, but biggest result was we held 40% of the moisture. Monocrop barley with covers, we held 37% of the moisture. A relay field this year, with our 2019 with corn this year, delayed terminated clover. That first slide you seen, this would be that field. 35%, which kind of bothers me, but then you start thinking about it. What do legumes do? They're hard on aggregates. So we're getting a benefit, but we've got the cycle burning here, so it's helping burn that aggregates up too. Now this one, that's one of them, the pan of soil there that I showcased at the beginning. This is my neighbor's soil, 50 feet away from, that'd be 50 feet away from that one. So 40% versus 27% holding capacity that we held. I think that's a high number, because when we actually did the test, it was almost like we had to force the water in that one. So I got to figure out, as we learn how to do this test, we got to figure out how to accommodate for that a little bit. But current relay field, different. This is the one that is a different soil type, but it's the only relay field we had after the miserable spring we had this year. That one held 42%. So that kind of shows you that power of having multiple living roots in there. These next two are side by side. They were both soybeans. One, if you were at the PFI field day, this was right where we started out in the field. Delayed terminated rye versus delayed terminated cereal rye in corn. So this is in soys, that's in corn. Very little difference at that point. But there again, you can see just that hair difference that having that more legume in there had the effect. This is when we set up for the test. All we do is we weigh out 100 grams of soil. I put it in coffee filters, and then I got a spaghetti strainer. Just have a pan of water there, have it weighed, put it in the basket or in the strainer, soak it, lift it out, let it drip dry, put it on the gram scale, weigh it. Write everything down. It's a pretty simple test that you guys can do, help figure out where your system's at in comparison. But back to the regenerative nation, this is kind of where I'm at anymore. I hear everybody say they're regenerative farmers, but I had the chance to drive a DEF tractor all fall, and it kind of bothered me, and this slide was born that day. You know, are you a regenerative farmer, or are you just a light on the dash blowing hot air? So if you can show me your soil, I'll salute you. But another little mindset of mine that I'm going to push through here yet is we all say compaction cures, or freeze thaw cures compaction. So I'm going to go all the way back to the Oregon Trail. This is our farm in 1930. I think a big thing we all need to start thinking about as we're moving forward is how was that farm developed? Well, it's all been done to it, leads to where we're at today. All goes back to farming in that nature's image. You know, this is in Kangaroo Island this February. This is kind of when it came together for me. They're still breaking land in Kangaroo Island. Does that land look worth breaking? It's what they call non-wetting sands. But they can buy a farm, clear the vegetation, break it, pay for it in 2 years. So how do you blame them for doing what they're doing? And the guy that's doing it, he brings it into a regenerative fashion after it's broke. So I mean, you want to see something pretty cool. He's seeding everything with an airplane. But this is the first step. They pull that ripper shank through there. With that non-wetting sands, there's a clay layer down there. They bring that clay layer up and then mix the clay layer in, and they can actually get that sand to where it'll hold water instead of repel water. Well, when I seen that day, what's that look like? How many of you guys pattern tiled your fields? It's almost like the same thing. You know, and I started thinking, it's like, this is why some of this don't work. You know, we are not dealing with a native system anymore. You know, Nicole touched on it pretty hard. We're going to go there yet. But, you know, how do we farm in nature's image? We got to start looking towards succession planning, stuff like that. All that what Nicole was just talking about, the whole chart is right there. Now, granted, she explained it a lot better than I'm going to try today. We're going to breeze through it here today because I don't know how I can follow her. But back to our farm in 1930, pay attention to that little triangle. The creek is right there. The railroad track used to be there. Look at all the little fence lines. 1940, things are changing. But there again, that triangle is. The railroad track's there. 1950, not too much different happened. 1960, you can tell the fence lines start going. We're going to farm fence row to fence row. Railroad track's still there, but look there. That triangle still shows up pretty evident. 1970. I'd really like to know what happened there that year. Oh, by the way, looks like the railroad track's starting to come out. I was a pretty young pup in that day. But 1980, whole farm went pattern tiled. We started getting a little smarter. We started putting the first buffers in. But, you know, there again, that triangle is. 2002, really got smarter. We started putting waterways back in and buffers in. And if you look real close, there's that triangle yet. The railroad's completely gone, but it's still a little evident there. 2011, I think we're starting, you know, we started playing with cover crops. I think I said 2002 is when we first bought our first annual ryegrass. 2006 is when we started with the interseeding. So 2016, it's about the best I've seen yet. We're getting nice homogeneous. I think Nicole mentioned some of that, and we start figuring some of this out. Stuff starts getting more even, more consistent. But it's about the halfway point. I think we're doing pretty good on time, but had to bring the warning back in this year. So please do try some of this home, but remember, we're trained professionals. Don't do it exactly the way we do it. Take the time to own it, figure it out yourself before you move forward. You know, adapt it. Don't try to adopt what I'm doing. But also keep this in mind. You know, the last 2 years have really brought this one back to our forefront. You can have the best plan out there, but Mother Nature's gonna have the final rule. So here we're gonna do a quick and dirty on the interseeding. You know, it's nothing new. I always gotta have a little equipment in here, so, you know, this is nothing new. It's just we've got better technology and tools nowadays. You know, this is the current drill I'm running, but we didn't start there. I always like to have a little fun because I know most people won't believe that I wore these out. But it's a great way to start learning stuff. And as we started seeing a little success, we had to start pulling from the junk inventory. We hurried up and built this. We did 75 acres the first year, I think it was. And we seen a little success, so we started building bigger. If you're going to build an interseeder rig, biggest thing to pay attention on this one, the first thing we learned is go to a big enough seed box to hold at least a tote. That's my money saving note for you for the day. But you know, we had good success with that, so then we bought this drill, tore it apart completely, built it the way I want it. The day she rolled out of the shop, somebody shows up for a photo shoot. I was so proud of it. 6 weeks later, we tore it apart again. We're never happy. We're always looking to improve. But the key thing we figured out that spring is that's when I started getting into my mind the twin row concept had to happen. You know, and that set us up for the interseeding. That set us up for the relay cropping that we're going to talk about shortly. All that is starting to be a continuous process. Always be looking ahead where you want to get to so it don't cost you the big bucks right from day one. You know, a lot of people see where we're at today. They want to get there. We've had several people starting to jump in there. I would highly advise start simple. Do what you can afford. Build your system. We're there to help you through it all, but there's going to be key things you need to learn on your farm as you go through this. You know, there's where we're at today. You know, that rig, well, I think there's about 10 of them just like that now we've helped build. Very effective machine. I've got the next one in my mind, so one of these days if somebody wants to buy that one, could be for sale soon. This one is kind of tribute to the one crazy slides where I had where I showed all the cropping. This is our 3 main planters right now. I'm so over-equipped for planting right now, it's not even funny, but I don't have a lot of money tied up in inventory. You know, this planter was brand new in '01, but she's been built into pretty, I don't think I could buy a new planter and get the technology we have on it today. You know, this is cycle blow. You'll hear a little reference to that shortly, and there's the drill. But the one thing I want to point on there is we have redundancy built in on each operation. Because if you don't have redundancy, when you're doing some of this, there's very little backup plans. You have to be your own backup plan. But back to 2016, you know, this is planting green in Northeast Iowa. It's all the bigger I can get it. Some years we get a little bit more, but this is kind of a general rule of thumb for me. If I can get that, I'm happy. Now I want to get to where we're roll terminating cover crops. That ain't going to happen there. Towards it a little bit later here, you're going to see where we're at on that. But I just want to kind of throw this in for refresher. You know, everybody says with the interseeding, how do we make it happen? It goes back to that banding system that we put on the planter. We band our residual right on the row. The rest in between the row is going to be managed differently from here on out. You know, $6 an acre in the residual. We're either going to roll terminate or we built a hooded sprayer now to manage the inside. They're 28 inches or 22. But close up of the spray brackets. This is kind of a review from 2017, so that's why I'm zipping through here a little bit. But when do we interseed? I hate it when people talk about that we need to have a certain stage for interseeding. I'd rather show you. The reason I like this video is everybody says we need scalability. That was the first day out with that drill and we did 200 acres. But the other thing I want to point out there, with the stage of corn, you kind of want to have a general rule, but the biggest deciding factor for me is this forecast. If we're a hot, fast, dry growing season, push. If we're a cool, wet growing, cool, slow growing season, take your time a little bit. You've got time. But I'd always rather err on the side of earlier than later in Northeast Iowa. Oh, the question is, what are we interseeding? This year we did a 32-way mix. I like diversity, but I'll also tell you to start simple. If I'm gonna suggest somebody start Andrew ryegrass, 3 clovers, maybe a half pound of brassicas, simple. We're gonna have flax and buckwheat in every mix anymore. I'll probably scale that 32 back because I think we did wean it down a little. It was a little too thin this year, but we were seeding 9 pounds an acre, or $9 an acre seeding mix this year. If I was going for the grazing, I would be aired to the higher side. When I put through this one together, we were averaging about $15 acre seed for 15, and we could document 15 bushel an acre. I've seen that over several different farms now. I'm pretty confident in that number, but then again, we don't test anymore. We're just, every acre is getting interseed, so I'm not selling interseeding, so I'll tell you what we've done. But biggest thing I like to point out, if you're going for residue removal in that, please make sure you're interseeding. The year we bale residue, dairy bought all the corn stalks we traded for manure. Then we're supposed to go through the bedding pack. Every single one of them, the feed quality was so high that they ended up going through the feed line. But that's the residue level we had after baling corn stalks. I knew there was going to be a few cattle guy in here, so I wanted to include that. I mean, we're still weatherproofed. We treat it like a second crop, though. If you're going to remove all that residue, make sure you're replacing it with manure at least, if nothing else. I'll trade a ton of manure for corn stalks any day. But that year, that's what it looked like. A lot of the last 2 years, that is our only option. We haven't had an after harvest option to get anything decent in. But another key thing we're starting to learn about is be paying attention to this guy, Mike Bredson. A couple years ago, I was with him up in South Dakota at Jonathan Lundgren's farm. Key thing to be paying attention to is the way he'd describe it, the biggest thing interseeding is doing for us is it's giving the bugs the flypaper effect. The key part there is a bug lands, chances are it's going to land on the wrong plant. So then it's got to take time and effort to pick up and move to the next plant. Every time it does that, chances are it's going to land on the wrong plant. Well, by the time it does it the 4th or 5th time, the predator or prey is going to be there and help you avoid insecticide and stuff like that. So we're going to jump over to the relay cropping. This is where we're planting a cereal crop, coming in and putting the soybean in. Biggest instigator for this one was 2000, I think this was 16 when we went field scale with this one. This whole field was 234 bushel an acre corn. This little plot here was the first relay field we did. Biggest thing to pay attention to is a 25% better return on investment. Better than 234 bushel an acre cornfield. I don't know about you guys, but that gets my attention. Says we're on to something. So there again, we finally had the parts and pieces in place. Now we're using the Cyclo. We got a shifting hitch on there. We just shift the planter over 15 inches. We're sneaking in there, putting the soybean in and wheat on that one. On the wheat fields, we were running $20 an acre seed cost and having 2 crops. How can we make cover crops pay? I got all the benefits of cover crops, turning them into cash crops. Here's harvesting, that'd be the winter wheat again. Keep it pretty simple at that point. Never mind the rear wheel, we were having auto steer issues that day, but it was too good a video to turn down, so. That was actually the 3rd set of blocker guards that we played with. The original ones, we had a good friend of mine's, they were steel. I don't like steel out in front of a combine. Simple fact is, if you run steel through a combine, you got a mess. gets expensive quick. So we went as simple bare bones as cutting a quick piece of drainage tile, cut it to the width you need, slit it, slam it over the guards, you're relay cropping in no time flat. I think if I had my labor in here, we had a grand total of $10. Simple, effective. But my mentor, this is where he's at. John Coots, Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin. He's using a John Deere row crop head, doing the same thing. Sad part is, the other year I kidnapped him, went to Michigan. It was the most expensive kidnapping I ever did, because that followed me home. You get to the point where you start seeing the weaknesses, you get enough acres and experience to justify moving to the next step. But that's also why I said earlier, sometimes you're better off building into a system like this. Don't start off with a row crop head. It's going to be my advice. Because you're going to make enough mistakes, it'll make it hard to cash flow. You're going to give up. Anybody think we're crazy yet? It wouldn't be the first time. Go ahead and tell me. This is where it gets fun. Back to that moisture management situation. Northeast Iowa said we had about 900 some of water, 900 some of snow. Somewhere we got to figure out how much moisture was in that snow, but how can we do this on limited moisture? Soybeans is down here, 450 to 700 millimeters. Winter wheat, cereal rye, and all that's in that 450. So there, if we're on the low end of that, we captured every inch of just our water. We've got enough moisture to make it. But we can't afford to waste any. We got to keep that in mind as we're moving forward. We've got to be monitoring our moisture all the time. But if it looks like we got enough moisture and we got the right spot on the calendar where we're going next, the day we take a cereal crop off, we're going to shove buckwheat in there. Same drill, doing the same old thing. That year, that was the third time that drill seeded a crop in that field. There we are, putting the buckwheat in right where the cereal rye was in that field. RTK was spot on that day. You can tell we just kind of leaned them stalks aside. There's the buckwheat emerging already. Soybeans rebound. You can tell the buckwheat's coming in there. Minimum weed control. Is this an option? I know there's a lot of organic guys in here starting to pay attention. Use another crop to thwart our weeds. Cover crops are great, but if we can use a cash crop, this is intended for a cash crop, but if, my deciding line on putting buckwheat in is probably July 20th. If we can get the cereal out of the way, we'll throw it in there. But after what we're seeing now, chances are I might put it in every year now. I've got a tote of buckwheat sitting there waiting, ready to go. As we sequence through, here's the buckwheat starting to come up through. How many people have heard of pollinator plots? We got them in the whole field. We're using buckwheat on every acre almost in the interseed mix. This really draws the bees. But when we got a field like that, the biggest thing I notice is sweat bees like you wouldn't believe. And I don't understand all the entomology aspect of it, but I know they eat soybean aphids. Some people say, well, they eat the pregnant aphids, so you're taking care of, I just know we don't have to spray for aphids. Another benefit, go ahead. Not if necessary. I'm conventional, but we're looking towards the organic side. If we can get that buckwheat in, there's nothing there, there'll be nothing to come. So we got beans and buckwheat, nothing's going to come through that biomass. Biggest thing I want you to pay attention on this slide, everybody's like, well, how do you time the harvest? Pay attention right here. Notice how much greener it is. That's where we pull in the field and set in. We drove some beans down and stuff like that. If you notice right down here, the beans are pretty green there. Up here, the beans are fully maturing. Buckwheat's maturing with the soybeans. It's kind of like putting the apple and the banana together in a sack to get them to ripen. The ethylene gas. There you go. Thanks, Chris. He's still supporting me. Chris. But there's harvest of the buckwheat and soybeans. Harvest them together. The only difference is we choke the air down in the combine, dirty up the sample a little bit, and then run them through the grain cleaner. Simple. Beans go one way, buckwheat go the other way. If we're going to keep doing this, we're seriously going to have to upgrade our grain cleaning capacity, but cash flow would say do it. So a lot of times when I'm out here talking, I like to talk break-evens. You know, how many of you guys can grow 30 bushel rye? Can you grow 30 bushel soybeans? It's not that hard to do it together. Throw in 400 pounds of buckwheat that year. You know, there's the numbers we got that year for buckwheat, rye, and soybeans. The good news is I can pretty well say a lot of times we double them numbers. You know, that year corn was 410, so it's equivalent of 410 bushel an acre, or 200 bushel an acre corn at 410. A lot less expense, a lot less risk. Lately, we've been playing a little with malt barley. You know, our quick and dirty cash flow on that was 50 bushel an acre malt barley at $8 that year. If I can do the 30 bushel raw soybeans, we had to apply fungicide that year per contract, but we're applying to full foliage, so go ahead.
What do you do with the next year after the buckwheat? Because it doesn't
We're using it on interseed in all our acres, so it's very manageable. But remember, I'm a conventional. Just acetochlorotrazine probably. He asked what we're doing the following year to manage buckwheat and stuff like that the following year in the crop. We're putting acetochlor, but I haven't seen an issue with it. There's going to be another slide here shortly to show you how neat it can be. Sometimes you got to turn a negative into a positive. But the wheat and soybeans, you know, we were told we could never make food grade wheat in Iowa without a fungicide. We do it almost every year anymore. Biggest problem is we run enough of it through the cover crop side. I can get more out of the cover crop side. Oh, by the way, we don't have to worry about protein and all that stuff, so it's kind of an easy shove. But biggest thing I want to hammer on some of this stuff, Nicole kind of mentioned it, a few other people have hit on it the last day or two, is nutrient density. You know, the China deal just got signed 2 days ago, 3 days ago? How many of you really analyzed what that was actually about? The biggest reason soybeans were a target is China doesn't want our soybeans. So they could afford to say, we're going to push them. They have insisting on, or mandating that they want 35 to 36% soybeans. Currently, or as of a couple years ago, the only one meeting that was Brazil. Last year, Argentina raised the bar. They are now above 35% protein soybeans. Meanwhile, U.S. is still at 34.2% protein soybeans. 2018, our soybeans were 39.65% protein. Last spring, I got called a liar out in Pennsylvania because I told them we were getting over $12 for our soybeans. There's a reason they pay us a premium. We earn it. And I think a lot of it's possible because of what we're all doing. You know, this right here, we pulled a sample from that field, and Jill Clapperton, this is back to that same field, first picture. We've been pulling a lot of samples there. Jill Clapperton could tell me everything that was done to that field in the last couple of years just based on what showed up in our nutrient density samples. This is harvesting soybeans with a nice green cover. The week before this, I was scared crapless. Soybeans about that tall, red clover about that tall. Thankfully, Mother Nature stepped in and did our desiccation. We got down to about 20 the night before. Took a little power, but we're hammering through clover and soybeans right there. You can see the rye stubble in there. There's the corn. And that, that back to that one picture where I showed you all the different. It's right there. This is where I'm at. Yield becomes irrelevant when you start focusing on quality. You know, we're selling dollars, we're not selling bushels. 2018, that same field, 40 bushel rye, 99% germination, 60 bushels food grade tofu beans. Conservatively, $12 a bushel. I didn't figure in any subsidies or anything on that. Our total cost per acre, seed, fertilizer, and chemical on the whole farm that year was $100 an acre. So I used that number on that field. Probably a little high, but I want to give us a little cushion. Oh, we got to harvest it twice, plant it twice, so I'll do that for $100 an acre. So long story short is we had $1,000 an acre left to pay the cash rent and management.
You save your own seed from cover or cash crops?
Yes. He asked if we're saving our own seed on cash crop or cover crop. I mean, long as we honor the plant prevent patents or whatever. I mean, if we might have to pay $1 or $2 premium, we'll do it. But like on cereal rye, and that's why I like focusing on cereal rye for most of the relay. I mean, I'm using a variety that I got from my organic neighbor many years ago when I was cleaning grain. I can't remember what variety it is, but it's nice, consistent. We're using that same variety on all the acres. But key thing I'd like to point out here, we as farmers get paid basically to manage and run equipment. Why do most of us want to give that away with that old easy button? Back to this field again. Yeah, this one's kind of a new slide I was playing with a little, trying to make sense of 2020, but one of the best things we ever did is put a 2020 monitor in our cab. How many would agree with that statement? What's the first thing you paid attention to when you did it? That old red button over here, loss per acre. Goes back to that return on investment map. What I'd like to see Precision Planting do is take our seed sense monitor and add the same button on there. When you're combining, wouldn't that make you think a little more? Instead of bushels per acre, start thinking about that profit or loss per acre as you're harvesting. But not everything works perfect in our world. So we're going to cover this. How are we doing on time here? About 10 minutes yet?
Yeah, it's 20 minutes, so we're supposed to open it up for questions. Can you stop after the
We're coming to the good part yet, so keep asking questions, that's all I'd say. Or I'll stick around afterwards, if that works. I'm trying. But this is how bad things can get when you're testing. But this is gramoxone burn-in standing corn. But we built a hooded sprayer this year as part of the management strategy for that clover. So there's what the clover looked like the day we hit it in standing corn. Most of you know there's not gramoxone resistant corn. But end result was there's where the gramoxone went. We documented 40 pounds of nitrogen we gained on that field. Where we left a check strip, this was supposed to be set up for the row mow, we documented 80 pounds of nitrogen. Well, the row mow never made it there because I blew it up. We never did anything to that strip and you couldn't tell it come harvest. But when we did do the nitrate samples, this one was excessive, this one was a little low. So it tells you, I mean, we produced the nitrogen and we got it in the plant. But $8 an acre herbicide program, non-GMO corn. And we're extending that carbon sequestration period. We're working with some third-party data. This is the test on that field. Biggest thing this whole thing is showing you, we're actually meeting or exceeding native soils on that field now. Key thing to pay attention to on that whole sheet, these findings suggest that within little as 4 years, we can map, we're on par with native soils. They compared to native timber and native prairie at, the same soil type at Luther College. But most of you guys have probably seen the Bob Recker stuff, so I'll kind of jump over that stuff quick. But all this is leading to where I think the new frontier is. Organic no-till. We started out with frost-seeded clover a year and a half ago. We were challenged to kind of do a plot on organic no-till. Had a guy from Washington come down with a Dawn ZRX planter, I think this was June 15th to 16th, something like that. It was way too late for conventional corn, but this plot was destined for testing. So had him come in and plant it, tried to figure out a few things that he was having issues with on his planter, but we got the corn planted. Back to that, always have a backup plan. The row mow didn't quite get done in time, so we push mowed it. 20-inch mower doesn't do bad in 30-inch rows. But the row mow finally made it. Most of you people would say, that corn looks pretty sick. We knew that. Thank you. But there was a impeller version we were testing that year. Last year at O-grade, we debuted that one, thinking that was going to be an option. Well, that one never made it out of the test stand. There's the model we finally had to hurry up and throw together last year just to satisfy the test needs we had. It was a great tool to learn, but it was also a little entertaining. 70 horse Honda horse out there running is kind of thrill jockey. Biggest thing I keep going back to is, we'd been testing in-row rolling. Well, after that test, we finally got it in everybody's heads that rolling is a simpler, cheaper option. So I think this is already kind of debuted, but we got to test it yet before it's officially released. This is going to be a product we're coming out with this spring from Dawn, in-row rolling. But how many of you guys would be proud of a cornfield that looks like that? No takers? Corn rows right there. Can't you see it? There's what it looked like after rolling. That's back to where them kids were standing. But we rolled that clover. This is where my mindset is going right now, and that ties in perfectly with what Nicole talked about a lot. We need to create a sufficient nitrogen environment, yet starved enough to help create a hungry system to keep a living legume fed on its own, plus share the nitrogen with corn. The only thing I can think is nitrogen is like crack. Once it gets a taste, it wants more. So if we can just figure out that balance, where it wants to be, where it needs to be, it all comes down to quorum sensing. I didn't think anybody down here would know about it until after Nicole hit it on it pretty good last night. But to me, it's simple as this. We're starting to see on the organic field this year, this is what we started seeing, nice big fairy rings and all that stuff. This corn has 0 applied nutrients other than neighbor pen pack straw, hog manure, and seed. It's the only thing on this field. There's what it looked like come harvest. Now it's the same plot, so actually it was corn on corn. I know that's a little breaking the rules on no-till organics, but we're pretty good at breaking rules, so. This is where I think we can go. The other day I was speaking right after a guy that talked about how to market $5 corn. How do we market $10 corn? On a 4-pass system almost. Plant it, roll it twice. Well, we'd had a mowing pass in there, but 4 passes before harvest. Okay, but then I'm not satisfied there. There's where I think we're going. I want to start getting to where we're selling corn by the ear. But another key thing we picked up in Australia this winter, remember these numbers, everybody wants to talk about carbon, but it's an 8-to-1 ratio carbon to water. So for every gram of carbon we can sequester, we can hold 8 grams of water. But that kind of brings us full circle. Management makes a difference. 50 feet away makes a difference. So back to here. Chris Nichols triggered this slide. Your average corn and bean producer is down here. The sun represents your peak carbon sequestration period. So your peak period is about right before the 6 weeks before pollination usually on corn and beans. So if you're doing cereal rye, you already expanded it. This is the months of the year. Bring in the soybean, relay it. Bring in the buckwheat. Oh, we set the combine a little tight, so we blow a little over the back. There's our volunteer cover crop for the following year. Here's our corn crop. Over winter, interseed mix that we put in there. Biggest thing to notice here is every session we're trying to overlap that carbon sequestration. Then we might come back with corn or soybeans that third year. But the biggest thing we realize now is the perennial is kind of what it brings to really tie this all together. I'm going to leave you guys with this thought. It goes back to the barrel. How many of you are focused on the level of the staves? When I think we should be focused on the condition of the barrel. Joe Clapperton always says we run a leaky system. Let's plug the leaks before we start worrying about a few other things, and if you listen to Nicole here, some of that self-balances. But it's all about sun capture and your perspective. It's all in how you look at some of this, if you're going to make it work or not. So with that, I think we got 5 minutes for questions yet. There's my contact info, live feeds on Twitter. YouTube's got most of our videos. Question is, how are we marketing a lot of the diverse crops we're growing? Biggest avenue right now is the cover crop side, but we're also working with breweries and a malting company. We're going to have, I've got corn in the shed right now that's going to a brewery. We've got buckwheat that's going to the brewery. We're going to try sunflowers to the brewery. A few other avenues like that we're really starting to focus and looking at. There's a company in Des Moines that we're looking at working with on, biggest thing I'm pushing for this year is getting these value-added markets more secure. That's the biggest avenue I think we really need to be focused on. That's a few of the people I've tried to contact with out here in the lobby. That's where we need to go. Go ahead.
What is the extent of your
Cleaning and separating, right now I have 2 small clipper cleaners that we tend to run the heck out of. I have purchased a bigger cleaner now. I just got to get it home. And we're starting to build. This winter I met with a guy, he's got kind of a full line of his own cleaning equipment just for his own operation. We're going to kind of work together on some of this now. He's got everything I need, so why I'm busy enough, I don't want to recreate the wheel if I can help it anymore. I used to think I could do that. It's a lot better to team up and work together with people. Yep.
What else do you think
What else do we need for cleaning equipment? Gravity table, spirals, aspirator would be a good asset. Like I said, two weeks ago, I was asked to go meet with a guy, and first thing he started showing us is all the equipment he had available. I'm like, perfect. He's got it on little running gears, so he's like, let's work together. I'm like, gold mine. So chances are that cleaning table that I bought is going to him, and he can I'll take my stuff to him or however it works. So, go ahead.
Do you use biochar?
No. Do I use biochar? I think that's a loaded issue right there. We've been paying attention to it for about 10 years. A good friend of mine that just passed away this summer, his mother is the lead researcher at Iowa State. I think that's a dangerous weapon, I guess is the best way I'm going to put it. You need to be careful what you're doing with it because it can tie up way more than you expect. Everybody's trying to recreate the terra preta that the Amazon Indians did. It's a great ideal, but you got to remember they didn't know what they were doing at the time. They've seen some great results, but when you start factoring in the loads that it actually takes to make a difference, start thinking about that. We're undergoing carbon testing right now, and from what I know, early data, we're probably going to be in the 3 to, I've heard up to 8 tons an acre some guys are at. You're injecting carbon with the plants. So if we can do, even at 3 ton, that's 6,000 pounds the acre. How is that going to compare to that pound or 2 of biochar you're going to put on? To me, it's just another crutch people are trying to reach out for. It's a good option, but good.
Loran, when you're twin rowing your ride, how do you decide, for us guys that have been doing ride broadcast, how do you
Seeds per acre on our twin row rye. I guess I might as well say we're back to about putting on full rate. You know, it used to be, hey, let's try to cut where we can, but it's easy to get a poor stand. You want a quality stand out there. You know, that's the lesson of 2018, 2019. Get enough seed out there. You can deal with the good stand better than you can deal with the poor stand.
Do you have any thoughts on Indigo Ag?
Indigo Ag, I'm signed up as a research partner for them, if that tells you anything. So ask away. I mean, if you got questions about them. I mean, there's a lot of guys signing on with Indigo. I guess, you know, I talked to Jay Fear and Keith Burns at our field day this year. I said, how big a black guy are we going to get working with them guys? And they said, hey, they're trying to move the ball forward. So if the whole thing implodes, sorry, we're trying to move the ball forward with them. You know, there's other companies coming to the forefront right now. You know, if you're not comfortable with Indigo, Nori is making great strides. You know, and I work enough with Indigo, I told them the other day, I said, folks, you better pay attention to Nori because they've already wrote a check to a farmer. That farmer's already getting credit for saving carbon credits. You know, people on social media are posting that they bought credits from Trey. That's going to be a pretty powerful tool. You know, now Trey's going to tell the story forward. He's buying a piece of equipment from us to help him advance the system. So, like I said, I told Indigo the other day they better write a check pretty soon, or you know, for years in the last year we were promised we were going to get a 5-year look back and pay us for what we've done good. Well, Nori's already wrote a check to Trey for that. Now Indigo is kind of dancing around that, so I'm supposed to be in Boston end of the month. We'll find out.